is Sheila Butler with Successful Women Talks. Thank you so much for joining me today. Here with guest Jennifer Boykin. Can't wait for you guys to meet her. Some of you may already know about her. Share her story. She is the mastermind behind the blog Life After Tampons. She's brave enough to have that URL, that name, and that just goes along with her story. So Jennifer, everyone please help me in welcoming Jennifer.
Thank you so much, Sheila. I'm happy to be here.
How are you?
I'm awesome today. We got an awful lot going on.
Busy. So the very first question, Jennifer, that I usually ask everyone is, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and how you got started with your business/blog?
Right. Well, I first went to school on a music scholarship. I'm a flautist, and I thought I was going to play the flute professionally, but that just was kind of boring and one-dimensional. So I ended up with a business undergrad, worked for IBM, and then 20 years a nonprofit. And along the way, I started to do some speaking and writing on inspirational topics, which has been my hobby my whole adult life. And I had a couple of training bra blogs when I was learning about social media and that sort of thing. And it all evolved until I got to lifeaftertampons.com, right?
I love that. Now you have some formal education, spent some time doing some other things. One of those things was working at IBM, and I think I read or heard you say somewhere that you had a lot of great training there, but the culture didn't fit for you. So How was that, and how did you transition in and out of such a corporation? Like everybody goes, ooh, I want to work for someone like IBM, but maybe it's not the right fit for everyone.
Well, I'm glad you asked that question, because that was really my first example in my life. Well, my second example. My first was switching out of music, but of really trusting my heart and going against what the common solution would have been, right? At that time, there was a big recession. Every person at IBM was told that 3,000 people applied for their job, and I hated it. It was such a bad fit for me culture-wise. On the other hand, though, it was an amazing place to be from, and I got to work with a lot of really, really smart people. But that was a really big leap of faith. I was in my 20s then.
And that's hard because some people, people see what other people are doing, right? And they want to compare themselves to other people. So I'm sure people saw you with a job at IBM, and those are really tough to get positions. So how in the world could you ever give that up? But it wasn't you.
That's right. Well, actually what happened was I knew it wasn't you, but my lifelong dilemma, self-trust am I going to have, right? Because what you talked about is when I compare my insides to your outsides, and and listening to that still small voice inside. And actually what happened was my girlfriend at the time went into labor. We were in our 20s, and the labor nurse discovered a tumor on her throat, and she had Hodgkin's disease, and she came home with a newborn and cancer, and I went in and quit the next day.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I guess it takes moments like that. And we all have those types and you've had a history of those moments. So why don't we talk a little bit about your background as far as some of those things in your life that have been very pivotal and made changes like this one as well?
Well, you're right. We all hear them, but we don't all heed them. Right? And what happens is the noise and the pain ratchets up in our lives until we do. So your results will beat you into submission. And that's usually how people come to my blog. I wrote a piece today about being exhausted and depleted, and that's usually how we come to our midlife experience, that place where we want to reinvent. But for me, as you were talking about, my story includes the death of a child, and we had talked about this beforehand. And that was really what my first work around inspirational speaking happened. After Grace died, I determined that I was going to be the best mother to her that I could be, and good mothers are healthy mothers. And so that meant letting go of my story around her. And so in order to do that, I took sort of an academic approach. I voraciously read everything that was written about healing from loss, but there was very, very, very little written for the layperson. It was all, and it's 20 years ago, so it was all like technical jargon and very, very little about newborn death. And in our culture, which is replace the loss, the messages I was getting was, you can have another baby. It's a good thing she wasn't grown, and that would have been a big loss if another friend had a daughter die who was in her 30s, and a family member said to me, that would have been just awful. Can you imagine? And I said, well, if my higher power had come to me and given me 35 years with Grace, I would have taken them. But our culture doesn't understand losing. And so what I did was I put a weekend workshop together And that led to another thing, to another thing. And before you know it, I was like in British Columbia speaking before large groups.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, it's and life is relative, I guess we could say, because what might seem really drastic to me, I mean, like I was explaining to you before we started recording, that I ended up kind of going out of business, a partnership with some friends that I had a business with that was a very successful business, and that was a true loss to me.
Right.
But it's so minor compared to, you know, when you compare it to other things, and it's really hard. But how do people get over? I mean, how do you teach people, or what tips and tricks can you say? If, you know, sometimes our lives suck, and we just need to get on with it. But how do you get people unstuck, or what kind of advice do you give someone in that situation?
Right. Well, the first thing I need to do is I need to backtrack with you, because you just dropped a stitch on yourself. And what I heard you say was, that's like a relatively small loss compared, because I just shared about my dead baby. So that can't compete with almost anything you're going to say, right? Most people think that can't compete, so that's a non-starter. So then we feel like, oh my God, I'm unworthy to have this loss, or it feels so ridiculous to share this loss. And even that feeling is a barrier to change, because what that does is we take permission away from ourselves to have our own experience. And unless we have permission to have our own experience, we can't heal. So there's one of your first answers to your question of how do you heal. The other thing that's really critical, and I didn't know this for a very long time, is that it's very, very important to keep your story evergreen, to be always willing to surrender what you think your version of your story is. Like, for example, after Grace, 3 boys came. Now, I wanted to be a healthy mother to Grace, but also to her boys. Now, Grace's story is very dramatic, and I could have got a lot of attention and play on that for a very long time. But what child can compete with a dead sister, right? They don't need a martyr mother. So healing from Grace's loss and being a great mother to those boys meant letting go of the story. And I don't bring it up unless there's a real healing reason to bring it up, because that's not her message. You know, her message is about transformation. That's what her legacy is. And so if you just come to the blog, you'll see transformation there, and you might not ever know about Grace.
Now, I love that. But let me ask you this. So did you have some people that felt, well, if you're not going to talk about it anymore, that it's sort of like going away like it never happened? I mean, how do you know, that's kind of a weird situation too. Like, do people think you're just putting that aside? Or, I mean, did you have any backlash from any family, or?
Well, no, my family was encouraging me to never bring it up again. That's, you know, that's the kind of generation that we come from, right?
That's
pull
right.
yourself. So, and they weren't doing that because they felt it was harmful to me. That was really the thinking of what was best for people. I don't know if I had backlash about that internally. You know, in the early days, I felt like I was being disloyal to her, like I was the only living, breathing example of that being, you know. And then someone explained to me that that her legacy, that her eternity is that I'm permanently changed. And so everything I do and everyone I meet, this conversation wouldn't have been possible without her. So in a way, it's 20 years later, but for me, she's very alive right now in this conversation because I'm a different person. But we're all shaped by that series of broken hearts and false starts and bankruptcies and lost jobs and broken relationships and bad finance choices. We're all an amalgamation of our stories. The trick is not to hold on to any of either the good parts or the bad parts, because wherever you're stuck, that's where you stay. So you want to keep your voice fluid. You want to keep your heart open and bring all of that into your next beautiful day, if you can.
Oh, I love that. And it makes total sense, because I had the same experience when I was, with the loss of this business. I was devastated at first, and then I had to decide, was it going to make me a better person or a bitter person? And right. I chose a better person. And although it took me a couple of years to get to the point where I'm very comfortable with talking about it, I understand it was in my life cycle. It was supposed to happen, and I am better because of that.
It's so funny you say that, because if you come to Life After Tampons, you'll see that I have a Get Better or Get Better series on healing from loss that's in there. Exactly. Either life limits you or expands you, and it's your choice. A lot of people don't know they have a choice, but bitterness is a choice.
I agree, but some people like to argue that, because I'm a glass half full kind of person, and I am the person that, I do have bad days, but in general, I'm a pretty happy person. But like, if I have a friend that's having a really difficult situation, but they continue to go through that same cycle, sometimes I just want to shake them and go, okay, really, you have to choose. You're going to stick
Yeah.
with this or you're going to be happy. But some people say, what is your opinion on the argument of that? Sometimes it's not a choice.
Oh, honey, I don't have an opinion because I've broken all of my opinions and rules many times over. But I will give you a technique that someone shared with me sometimes, because if you have fear of making mistakes, or if you have perfectionism as one of your character traits, it's real easy to get stuck in that. You don't know when to let go of something. And so just recently, my girlfriend this weekend explained that her girlfriend taught her this technique, is that when she's stuck in a flux on something and she's in and out and in and out and in and out and in and out, every month on the beginning of the month, she looks at herself in the bathroom mirror and says, Jen, it's the first of the month. And that's today, by the way. So anything that you're in quandary about, go to the bathroom right now and stand there and go, are you in or are you out, Jen? Which is it? And then you can go, well, I'm in. I'm in my job for this month. I'm in my marriage for this month. I'm in my investments for this month. And then you go out and live your life for 30 or 31 more days, and you don't come back and revisit that because you made a 30-day decision. And the brilliance about that is that it's long enough that you can still move your life forward, but it's not so permanent that you feel like, oh, if I make a mistake, I can't unmake it.
I like that. Sometimes because people go, what's your 1-year plan, 3-year plan? Who
Yeah.
knows? What is my 1-month plan? Because then that gives you it in bite-sized chunks, and I can handle that, right?
Right.
So let me ask you, I think I learned about you I heard Jonathan Fields. And he was raving about you and your writing ability, and your voice is amazing. And by voice, we're talking your writing voice. But you weren't sure about your writing. Like, you went to school, did some studying. I think you were trained, and at the end of your course, your Pulitzer Prize professor said, you're amazing. And you were like, wow. How did you lose that for 10 years? And then how did you get back to it?
Oh my gosh, nobody ever asked me that question. It's like, one of those chagrin stories. But he was like one of those really scary graduate writing professors. And he did win the Pulitzer Prize. And like all semester, I was standing on my head trying to please this man. And he was not given any. I'll tell you, he just does a very, very slight hand on praise. But at the end, on the final paper that he actually helped me get published in the Washington Post, and it was on the story of healing from loss, he said, you're the most gifted student writer I ever worked with. And I didn't write again for 10 years. Completely freaked me out. Because, it was my deepest dream. It was my truest dream. And to take the risk of not having it succeed, it was better to keep in my mind, it's not very good strategy, but in my mind, it was better to have the illusion that someday I'm going to write a bestseller, someday I'm going to do this or that, but then blame it on my commitments why it couldn't be today, right? It's because I'm surprise divorced. It's because I have 3 kids. It's because I have $49 in the bank. It's because of this. It's because of that. It's because of this. And my readers do the same thing. So I can speak with great authenticity to that. Now, when I finally got to that place, was like, well, sweetheart, you're gonna be 50. Like, what the hell? How did that happen? And then I was like, well, there may not be another time. And now everyone else has to stop for me. Everyone else. Wow. It's like you were saying, everyone else is stopping for me. Everyone in my commitment circle I'm taking a turn now. And I did that, and they were like, okay, there's Mom having her turn. I'll pass the salad. And it was like such a non-starter. It didn't really impact them. It was all in my mind.
And you feared for a long time that it would, I'm guessing. Because that's what we do when we're not sure. We think we fear that something terrible is going to happen. When people find out, they really don't care.
Well, I was afraid that people weren't going to like my stuff.
Interesting.
And it just the opposite has happened. Look what's happened. It's like amazing. Like you said, I'm working with Jonathan now. I'm one of 12 national brands selected. And I was only on day 15 of my business when he called me to interview me and pick me to be part of that. It was amazing. My literal 50th birthday.
Wow. And this is that whole point that I have a conversation with people sometimes. They're like, well, how did you know how to start a business? How did you get those skill sets? What made you do it? Why were you not afraid? Well, I was, and I didn't know everything, and I learn as I go. But what if I had not tried? Same with you.
Yeah, you have to just decide you don't care about not knowing.
Yeah.
So whether you know or you don't know, there's either a business there or there's not. I mean, the only way to know is to do, and it's the doing that learns, that is the teacher, right?
Right.
I mean, it's iteration that gives you the experience.
And I'm guessing you work with because your customer base, your clientele, your followers, they are your community. They
Right.
are probably, like you said, middle age, and they've gone through that whole. They've probably been mothers. They've probably been wives. They've taken care of families. They've worked in corporations. They've done and done and done and given and given and given to someone else. How do they take that in and say, "I'm now going to focus on me"? How difficult of a challenge is that to get women to really
Right.
go, "It's me. It's all about me now"?
Well, that's funny you should ask about my demographic because I thought it was going to be all women my age, but as it's turned out, it starts almost a generation earlier. My readers start in their early to mid 30s, and I have a really long high segment in that. And I think it's like they look at our stuff and they're like, "Oh, cautionary tale, cautionary tale, right? Don't do this, don't do that." And then about 5% of my readers are men who just love, because if you read my stuff, it's really just life stuff. It's not
Right.
so, but it's kind of fun and snarky. And so I guess they like that. It's not a bunch of whining women. I don't allow that on my space because I think that that is, I mean, my subtitle is Quit Your Bitch and Change Your Life, right? So no bitching, just doing, or not doing, but no bitching. And so I think that when women get to me, they get there however they are, but they almost always come in exhausted. I think that was your question
Yeah,
was
because
like
it's tough. I mean, I think
Mhm.
for so long, I didn't become a mom until I was 40. I adopted two kiddos. So my kids are 3.5 and 2.5. That changes your life. I had 20 years to kind of play and do all of those fun things. But I can't imagine doing what I do today 20 years ago because I wouldn't be the person that I am today. So I feel I'm lucky in that sense. But some women aren't. They put everything for themselves aside.
Well, it's a little ego in that, right? There's a little bit of ego that we have to own up into that, to me, there's nothing more boring than a woman going on and on and on and on about her family. I could really care less how perfect your kids are because however they are right now isn't how they're going to be for their whole lives. And it's very boring to me. It's just like, well, what are you, just a uterus on legs? I mean, do you have any thinking outside of that? I really, but a lot of women do. They get their kicks from that. Through living narcissistically through their children, or it's just fear, or worse, it's mindlessness. We think we don't have a choice, and then we get angry and we want to blame that on them. But it was our choice. It's always our choice. This today I wrote a piece, and someone wrote in about she asked her husband if he could watch the kids once a week so she could go do something for herself. And she was a younger woman, younger kids, and I thanked her for that. But I reminded her that neither mothers nor fathers babysit. We all parent.
Right.
And so nobody asks the mother, "Will you watch the kids while I can go for a run?" I mean, we don't babysit our own children. We parent,
That's right.
and
And it
that's right.
should be, although it's not always that way, it should be somewhat equal.
Mm, maybe I don't know about shoulds or not, but the beautiful thing is the world needs all kinds of different people, and so we did it the way we did it, but the past doesn't have to be prologue,
Sure.
right? Yeah,
So you mentioned earlier about your snarky writing. I've heard you kind of talk about that a bit. Was
right.
that difficult to get? Like, some people want to just perform the way they think they should, say the things
Yeah,
they think they should, write about the
yeah,
things they think people want them to write about. But you kind of went against that. I mean, you've got a
yeah.
really original name, and you write with a really original voice. How challenging was that?
Once I decided to stop thinking about what everybody else was thinking about and stop managing that because you have no control over that anyway. And once I understood the spiritual truth that you attract what you put out, and this is not secret woo-woo stuff. It's marketing. It's human psychology. We self-select people that say things and dress the way we're interested in and have the kinds of lives that we're interested in. Those are the people we're attracted to. So every time you put some phony version of yourself out, you're going to attract people that are attracted to that. And then you're really in a sticky wicket because as you want to get back more true to yourself. So it's a process though. Like I said, I had these 2 or 3 training bra blogs. Like for example, before this one, my whole life has been a study of recovery issues and decades of that. And so one of the courage to change .us, that it was actually .us, but then I thought, oh, isn't that cute? It's .us, like that's the only thing you can change. But then I tried to write for it, and it was like a Massengale disposable douche blog. I mean, it was so la 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 la, and I'm not that at all. And there was such a disconnect in all of that. And it wasn't until, and then over on the side was meet your midlife midwife or whatever, Jennifer. And I said my little crap about who I am. And at the very bottom, it said, and here at Courage to Change, we ask the central question of all women: is there life after tampons? And one night in my menopausal insomnia, I woke up at 3:30 in the morning and I thought, life after tampons, life after tampons. It's like, do I have the stones to claim that? And I was like, well, I'm not sure I have the stones. It's like, well, of course you have who else would have them? And it's like, well, and as I said, I looked up the URL and then I had to call friends and, but once I put it out there, the response has been off the charts. It's so refreshing to people that to have someone that has this voice where I'm not always right, but I'm always authentic.
I think that's classic.
Wrong.
Yeah.
But oops, but I don't even care about that because my mistakes, it's like big deal. You take your spiritual pooper scooper and you go out in your day and you go, sorry, I'll scoop it right up and let me make amends. I mean, it's just me being a person. And so I receive forgiveness to the extent that I allow it for other people. I receive mercy to the extent that I give it to other people. And so I've decided to embrace my humanity.
I love that. So I know you offer some coaching, you do some coaching, but you also are doing a couple of courses. So let's talk about that just a little bit. And you have like a new book coming out as well, like an ebook or book?
I am. I'm working on a book called A Crash Course in Joy, and that's going to be a free download book coming in the next, whenever it comes out, soon as it like hot on the presses right now. It's not off at all. I do offer workshops from time to time. I just finished up one called Craft Your Comeback, and that was awesome. And I do a limited amount of one-on-one work, but what I'm really best at is quick, short bursts of strategy. 2 hours. And during those 2-hour one-on-one calls, we get right to brass tacks, where the blocks are, where the barriers to change, and then we sketch an outline of where you want to be, and then we put my IBM think tank on, and we give you a strategic plan for how to get there, step by step, and knocking over the adversities.
I love that. So if someone was out there, I mean, you're talking somebody like a woman that's deciding, or maybe a man, because you have both, but maybe wanting to start a business or just not sure where they are in life. I mean, where do you see your...
Well, email me, Jennifer@lifeaftertampons.com, and I'll point you to the right resource. Otherwise, you can find our whole community of really rockin' women at www.lifeaftertampons.com.
Perfect. We will link all that up in the show notes.
Terrific.
Jennifer, this has been a pleasure. I love your mission. I love your blog. I love that you're not afraid just to put it out there and be yourself, because it is hard. I mean, I think we all struggle with that in life, and you make it easy and you make it okay.
Yeah, do it, girl. It's okay for everyone.
That's right. Life is too short, right?
Life is too uncertain. We don't know if it's short or not, but it's definitely not a given. And so you only have this moment. Oops, missed it. This one.
I love that. Jennifer, thank you, and I appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you.
Take care.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye. Okay, guys, that's a wrap on this episode. Thank you again so much for joining me, and I ask that you go over to our website, www.successfulwomentalk.com. Join our community by signing up for the email list. This is the way that our community and show continues to grow. I appreciate your support, and I'll see you in the next interview.